Welcome to Big Money Stylist, episode 18. I feel like I wasn't here for a couple of weeks, but it was just 1 week, but it seemed like forever.
It's funny how those weeks turn into 2 and then 3, and all of a sudden we feel like we've been gone for 10 years. So
episode 18, how are we here already?
I know. Wow, right? Feels like we just started.
I know.
I mean, I feel like it is still January now. I'm like, no, it's May. BMS convention starts, pre-training starts in 2 weeks.
I know.
So who are we? What is happening?
What year is it?
I'm telling you, come the end of the year, we're going to be like, where's 2018?
Yeah.
What actually happened? So super excited to be talking to you guys today. I'm kind of in love with today's topic, basically. And the main topic of today, we go through one every single week. We go through power, production, profit, and protection. And today is power. And inside the topic of power, we are linking it up to one word, and that word is capacity. Coach Val, what is capacity to you? I like the whisper in the background. I appreciate it.
I didn't hear it. These headphones really block out.
That's
She
the
goes,
hair.
Capacity.
Oh, the echo. I like it. Capacity is your ability to deal with shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way to
Amen.
put it. Danielle, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just feel like that people cave too easy. Like when stress gets too much and they're like, I just can't do it. I think we're capable of much more than we give ourselves credit for. And it's like once you push through a certain threshold, you're like, oh, all of a sudden what was scary becomes the new norm. And so you change your capacity as a human being if you're willing to put yourself in the right direction and kind of throw yourself in front of the fire and learn and grow from it and continue to move on. I know I was actually, I don't know if you guys knew this, you probably do, but I was super shy growing up. Like literally in high school, if a boy would talk to me, my face would go bright red and I'd be like, and a lot of people don't know that about me. And it was funny, my mother-in-law, my birthday was last week, and she sent me a card and she was like, she said something like, can you believe the shy little hairdresser I once knew? And at first I was kind of triggered. I was like, screw you, I'm not shy. But then I think back and I'm like, I was this person, and because I value growth and I wanted to just kind of come out of my shell, I guess, you have to increase your capacity to become a better version of you, I guess. So that's for me when we touch base on power and capacity, it's finding your own power and capacity within that helps you be a better human being.
And
Amen.
Yeah, and think about it. There was a time where BMS was, 10 artists inside of the old DKW salon.
Right.
And BMS Con didn't even exist. Now we had our first one already, which at first when we heard it's 165 artists, I know Val, she goes, the way I know I won is if I don't, should do be my pants. Congrats, Val. You survived. I'm so happy
I
for
set
you.
those goals high, you guys.
Hey,
But it's true. If you think about I remember when we did BMS last year and I was we were doing our small 10% classes, and then so to have 175 artists in the room teaching them MBR and being on that stage, I didn't really I always kind of visualize myself as being that platform artist, but always told myself, I don't know, that's scary, I can't do it. And then when you get up there and you're kind of in the mix and you're doing what you love, I was surprised with how easy it was. And just being up there felt kind of again, it was kind of scary, but then it became the new norm. And so it's the more you push yourself, the more you're oh, look at the old me, peace out,
Yeah.
So it's cool.
well, then not only that, we had 165 in December, and then come this June, in 2 weeks, we start pre-training for 350 artists. We went from 0 to 350 in a matter of 6 months. That's insanity. I mean, the growth that we have here, the ability that we're able to do shit inside of BMS and Mastermind. When I look back to where it was when I even started 6 months ago, we didn't do it at the Surf and Sand. We didn't have all the videos that we have. We didn't have anything. We just did it inside of the salon. It's so different now.
When I took my class, it was me and 2 other girls, and it was in the very, very first salon. Yeah, the old
Yeah,
salon.
and that wasn't that long ago.
I know, 2.5 years ago, and it was amazing at the time. But that's what's so cool. You were at your capacity there, and then you're no, we're doing it bigger, we're doing it better, and then now we're about to be on stage with 300 people, from 3 people to 350.
That's pretty cool. But I don't know about you guys, but I get to this place where I feel I'm stagnant with things, and going in and doing the 3% in classes anymore. I was like, fuck it, I'm out. Like, this sucks. And then part of me is like, I can't be out. Like, I'm like emotionally and like just so invested in it. And like, I'm like, something's telling me like, you wuss, like you can't be out, you know?
Yeah.
And so then I get to this place where the new norm is no longer serving me. And I'm like, cool, what's next? And so I push through that stress to overcome and like just go on to a whole nother level. But what people don't understand is capacity is, and your power of production is phases. It's phases. It's not like you're always going to have this crazy amount of stress level. And if you would have told me when we were doing that little class with all three of us, like, hey, Danielle, in a matter of 2 years, you're going to be teaching 350 stylists on a stage, I've been like, oh, I'd get overwhelmed.
Right.
And not that I'd get nervous, like being on stage and talking and teaching, but I would literally like feel myself like shutting down. And so you have to take it in steps, because you can't fathom going from 3 to 350 overnight.
Right. And when you are willing to put yourself out of your comfort zone and to keep pushing through your threshold like you were talking about, it's kind of like the next natural step. Like it's a natural progression and not that overwhelming sense. If you're just like each day taking a step to like further your capacity to take on more, to go further outside your comfort zone in the name of growing to be a better version of yourself, it's just the next natural progression.
But Danielle, I love what you said. You kind of mentioned it earlier. You said your mother-in-law triggered the fuck out of you whenever she told you were shy. But that's something that I think is very interesting, because we do have power and our capacity here. I mean, it's definitely, we have pretty big buckets. That's how I feel about every single person on the team. But with that, triggers happen. So Danielle, can you explain to people like what exactly is a trigger? Like, what does that mean?
I hate triggers. Like it's funny because like, it's good though, because I feel like a trigger is like, say somebody says something or they do something and it just drives you nuts. And how I explain it is it's almost like a mirror though. If you're triggered, what does that say about you? And so if she's saying like, so I love you, mother-in-law. If she's saying like, oh, cute little shy Danielle, it's because like I think deep down I was like, fuck you, I'm not shy, but I was. You know what I mean? So it triggers me like, oh, that's the old me and I don't want to go back there. But then I also take it and I'm like, okay, well, if I don't want to be that person, how do I kind of step out of my comfort zone? I become the newer, better version of myself? And so in life, we'll get triggers all the time. Like even like I'll be scrolling through social media and I just get bugged, or somebody makes a comment on our ads or whatever. And I get triggered because somebody even made a comment on one of our ads that was like, oh, these don't work or something. And I was like, screw you, you know? And so I was
they
like,
don't work or you don't work.
Right? and I want to be like triggered and be like, you don't know, you're ignorant. But then I always like kind of flip it. I'm like, well, I was there too. But that's what's so cool about like what we're doing with our education and stuff is like, I'll see stylists and they'll make an ignorant comment, or a student that makes an ignorant comment, and don't be triggered by the word ignorant. I get that can even be a little bit triggering. Like, I'm not ignorant, but I see that I was there too. So I can teach from a place of where I'm at, knowing that I was there.
Right.
And that triggers happen, and that's okay. You just have to be willing to flip that trigger, put a mirror up and say, okay, why is this pissing me off? Or is this pissing me off? I don't know. Because I'll get triggered on other stuff and I'm like, I don't know why this is pissing me off. But I'm not going to sit here and stress about it because I don't have time for that. So there's oftentimes too where I'm like, I don't know. I don't have time to worry about it. So I'm going to focus my energy here. So a trigger can be something that can be beneficial, you know, if you're willing to flip it, I guess what you could say.
And then Val, in regards to triggers and power, what happens when someone actually is triggered?
Oh, you lose your power. You like revert back because you get triggered and you're not like standing in your place and you're not in your like highest version of yourself. So you revert back and like clam up and you're not in your power any longer.
And so for you, what have you seen? Like, what are your triggers for you, like inside of your life?
I know. I was like, when we were talking about this earlier, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure I have some. I'd love to throw myself under the bus, but I don't know. And you were saying it's your kids. Like, your kids are your triggers. Like, if anything is, like, going sideways with your kids or, like, you have that mom guilt or, like, anything, like, you, like, immediately go out of your power. And I'm like, that's so true.
That's true.
That's completely my trigger.
I remember it was probably, I don't know, it was like 2-3 years ago. And I was like overwhelmed by all this mommy guilt. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm not making, it's not worth it. Like I need to put all my time into my kids. And literally there's moments in my life where it's like my higher self comes up and like kicks me in the back a little bit. And I was like, you idiot. And I had one of these moments where it's like, you have no idea how many people that you could affect. You need to be fulfilled by this. You don't need to put on this guilt. Like, okay, like you can't do this. Like that was me reverting back and playing small and making up an excuse that I couldn't go to the next level because I got to be with my kids. You know what I mean? And so I think in a way for me, I do want to spend time with my kids and I want to create that balance, but I couldn't let that guilt hold me back either.
Yeah.
And so that's like a big thing for me too. And I liked what you said, how it just like sometimes triggers make you revert, which I noticed that a lot in myself, where it's like somebody will do something or say something and I'm like, screw it, it's not worth it anymore. And you can't, that's not the direction you want to go.
Right.
And so oftentimes if you're feeling like, okay, well, I can't go this way. Okay, well then you're not happy here, so why stay in this little space, you know?
Yep.
So you can't let it like push you back.
And I think it's super interesting because there are so many times, like when Val and I were talking earlier about this, and she's like, I don't know what my triggers are. I'm like, me either. Nothing triggers me. She's like, yeah. And then we sat there. I actually had to like figure out Val's triggers. And I'm like, no, you get triggered. Like, I've seen what happens. This triggers you. This is how you respond. This triggers you. This is how you respond to that. And she's like, well, actually, when I think about you, this is what you do. And I'm like, son of a bitch, I do that. But
what do you do? I want to hear.
So one of my biggest triggers is power framing. So if you don't know what power framing is, go look at Warrior. That's basically what it is. But it's someone really kind of trying to hold the place that you're in and putting you in almost like it's a frame of where they want you to be and feel and do. I don't like that. I never
You don't
realized
like being put in a box.
I don't like being power framed. Framing, fine. Everybody frames everybody. I get that. I see it. I know it. Everybody does it. But I didn't realize how much I hated being power framed until I went to Feelings Con in Utah, because that was like power framing to the max. They're yelling at you when you walk in, and I walked in. The minute they started screaming, I felt myself like almost completely seize up, and I was like, ooh. And for me, it was an immediate, like, I wanted to like hit back, and I wanted to come back like, you're not going to fucking power frame me. It was really hard to reel myself back in.
So how did you do it?
Well, I text Garrett and I was like, I hate them. They're fucking dicks. They're power framing. It's garbage. They're doing terrible. And Garrett said, maybe you need to.
Like, did you feel like it was knocking you down? Or
I felt like they were trying to do that.
And she's not receptive. Like, once she feels someone's power framing her, then it's like fucking shut down. All the walls are up, and she's coming with like both guns a-blazing.
My walls will go up 100 feet higher.
I'm looking for red flags to look for when awning. I'm like, did I power frame that too hard? Like, she's coming at me pretty strong. No.
Oh no, trust me. If I feel like Val saw me inside of Feelings Con, she knew what me like coming back was, and because she knew like even this is how bad it was. They would tell you, they're like, put all your stuff to the side of the room. Yeah. And I had one of our guy, Dan, I had one of his jackets and I put it over my legs because the place was -3 degrees. The guy looked at me screaming and was like, Ani, put your jacket to the side of the room. It made me so fucking angry. I stood up, I looked him in the eyes, I put the jacket on, and then I just sat back down. And I was just like, And Dan looked at me and he was like, son of a bitch. But that
we're so getting kicked out of this.
Yeah, but that for me was a super hot button issue, and I didn't realize it until I went through this. And then with triggers, like, you have to learn to just be bigger than that and be better and learn to deal with it.
What's my trigger, do you think?
Social media.
Yeah, for sure.
Fucking social media.
Fucking social media. But it is because you see things, and I think the biggest thing with you is you, like, all of us, it's not just like, oh, NPR is great, it's fun. Like, we're obsessed with it.
I see too much, and I'm like,
yeah, but it's, you love it so much. Like, it's been blood, sweat, and tears for you, for so many
years.
You
know what I don't like about social media? And I think this is why I get triggered. Because it just seems like such fake bullshit. Like, I like to connect with people that I know and like, but I have a really hard time with doing comments and stuff on people I don't know. And I know it's networking, but I'm not great at networking.
Right.
And so for me, when I like to make a comment, it has to be sincere, you know? And so.
Well, you're not good with like surface and fake.
I can't do it. They're called Natural Beaded Rows for a reason. Just kidding.
Because shit's natural, guys.
Yeah,
But no, triggers, I mean, I feel like that's something that can super knock someone over. And even like when you're on social media or things like that, and someone, they're like, or if a client messages you and they're like, I didn't really love this highlight, you're like, triggered. How dare you not like my work? It's perfect. It's beautiful. Like, whoa, reel yourself back in a little bit. But I know, like, Val, with your kids, like, that was a really big one for you. And
it was.
Feelings Con was
gnarly.
Yeah.
What did they trigger you there about?
Well, when we were done with, you didn't have your phone throughout the day. Yeah. And so when I went to check my phone, I don't know if you had heard, like, Sawyer had a crazy incident at school where there was a guy who had a gun.
And in case you don't know, Sawyer is Val's daughter. 7.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So
wait. What's Feelings Con, really quick?
I'm so sorry. So Feelings Con, it's,
it's not really
let me explain what what that is. So Feelings Con is actually a course. It's a 3-day course held in Salt Lake City, Utah, and it's called Impact Quest, and we just call it Feelings Con because it's where you go and you really do deal with feelings and shit that you kind of knew was there that you didn't know was there, and it kind of breaks you down to build you back up and be a better version of yourself.
Yeah, the best version.
The best version. And I will say, I've made a lot of jokes about it. I'm super grateful that I went. Like, that was... Day one was gnarly. Like, it was not easy. I ended up yelling at Garrett and just, like, crying in my room. Like, it was a shit show.
It was.
But by the end, I was like, oh, I'm so glad I went, to the point where I'm actually going to part 2 this summer. So clearly I liked it, but it was so much power framing for me at first.
Right.
And that I didn't realize was such a big trigger that sent me, like, over the edge.
Right.
I just wanted to yell and scream back. So that was a little rough. But Val, Sawyer...
Okay,
kids school.
So the kids' school, so she was out. I got a text and saying, like, this incident happened at Sawyer's school from one of my clients. Our kids go to the same school. And so there was a guy outside with a gun, and the cops were called. Like, the whole, like, neighborhood got shut down. The alarm got sounded at the school. They were, like, yelling, this is not a drill, find cover. So my daughter had to, like, grab her friend's hand, like, run into a classroom that wasn't even her classroom, hide under her desk. Like, it just, for her, was, like, a super scary incident. And if you know me, like, I never leave my kids. Like, I've never even left them overnight more than one night. So it was hard for me to go to that in the first place. And then kind of like my worst fears came to like fruition. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So we're at this place where we're uncovering all these moments of why you are who you are and what stories you've held on to and how it's turned you into this person. And I'm struggling with like, oh my gosh, is this going to be the turning moment for Sawyer where she's like pissed at me years down the road that I went to a work thing and didn't come home. And that was like the scariest moment of her life. And I wasn't there for her. But at the same time, like when I was communicating that with Garrett, I'm like, oh my God, like the worst thing like happened. I can't stay here. Like on top of the fact that they were like not beating you down, but they were like beating you down to like get to the core of like who you are and how you can be a better version of yourself. So I just had like so many emotions and guilt and like my worst fears coming to fruition. And Garrett's like, I hear you, but there are no accidents. And who will you become if you stay there? It already happened. You know, like
there's just nothing you can do. You can't change it.
And so I was wrecked. Like I think that day was like probably the worst I've ever been. Like just because I was dealing with everything that they were like talking and breaking you down about, and then that, but those words like spoke to me when Garrett said like, who will you become? And I'm like, well, I gotta fucking find out. So that was the moment that I chose to like go through my capacity, reach to a bigger version of myself, and I didn't go home, even though everything in me was saying go home. There was this teeny tiny whisper saying, stay. But who will you become? Like write it out and see what happens. And I am glad that I did. And it was like so many things came from it because I was able to like finish out the course. I was able to see that Ryan my husband can handle things like the way he handled everything. I didn't tell him what to do, and he freaking like rose like no other and handled Sawyer perfectly, and they've been bonded in a way that like they never have been before because of that. So like I'm choosing to focus on like the positive. And then the other day when we had that class and Lennox was like so sick, and
Lennox is her son.
And I hadn't been to bed, and normally I would be like, oh my God, this is so tough. But that was like nothing because my capacity was so much bigger. I'm like, I haven't been to sleep, but I'm freaking going to work and I'm going to teach my ass off in this class and we're going to do graduation. Like it didn't even I didn't even flinch at that.
I see you like with how you are and like with your kids, and it reminds me of myself a lot. I think that I'm a super chill person, but I have stress and anxiety around my children. Like I always want to be the best mom I can and just always be there for them. And I think when you work, it's like it 10x's that anxiety about your kids. Just because you're like, if something goes wrong, I chose to work. You know? And so there's like this stupid guilt that comes with like being a woman and working and having children. And it's interesting because Garrett could never really relate. But I think for men, they're a little bit, not that they don't love their children, but they're not as connected as we are. Because they didn't actually deliver them or give birth to them, or they're not around them as much because they're usually men are the kind of the sole providers and they're working more, and like maybe women are not working as much. And I don't know, I always just feel like women are a little bit more bonded, and so it's hard for us to kind of like let go. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
And I remember being in this place like so many times where I was like, I can't travel, I can't do this because my kids, and what if then I'm a bad mom, and what, you know what I mean? And then the more you kind of like let go, the more I felt like I was just like, okay, I can't live my life like that. Do you know what I mean? And like you said, like things happen kind of how they're supposed to happen, and it's just how it is. And I always tell, there's this thing that always goes on in my mind where I don't know if you guys do this as women or as a mother yourself, but like you'll come up with the most crazy scenario in your head. Like it's not even like the alarm went off in the school. Like it could have been like there was bombs and a tsunami, and then like literally that's where my mind goes. And I'm like, but I chose to be here and there's a tsunami. And so it's like I'll be like, and my mind plays off itself, you know?
Yeah.
And I have to tell myself like, stop it, that's ridiculous. And then I always have that small voice that's like, they're fine. They're fine. Do you know what I mean? But then there's also that mommy intuition where you're like, I'm just going to check up on that. So I always tell like other women and moms, like be intuitive and be in tune with that like mommy intuition, but try to like kind of push those ridiculous stories down and really like tune in like they're fine. And the more you do that, you realize like, yeah, kids are fine and they are going to figure out life. And Ryan probably did have a great moment with Sawyer. You know what I mean? And so the more you do it, you're just kind of like, oh, okay. And then you realize your purpose is so much bigger than just worrying about that. And even that can make us play small.
Yep.
And it's like, it's not that I don't love my kids to death, but even focusing and having that much anxiety around them makes me play small.
Yep.
So I have to find this balance of like connecting with my children and learning that I'm serving a bigger purpose beyond just being there with my children. Because what happens is kids are going to grow up. They're going to get married and whatnot. And where is your purpose? Are you still going to stress about your own kids when they're 35? You might a little bit, but you really have to like find purpose in your own life. So
what it got me clear on was me playing small also made everyone else play small. Like I wasn't giving Ryan the opportunity to rise as the great dad that he was. I wasn't giving Sawyer the opportunity of like, no one told her what to do, but she was smart enough to grab a friend, to go into a classroom she wasn't aware of and duck and cover. Like, you know, like because I'm always micromanaging because I want them to be so safe, they were playing in a smaller version of themselves. So we all grew as like a family, and that part is like so cool. And that's, I'm sure, what you get when you're like serving your purpose, when like you're doing the classes. Like you're growing and you're going past your capacity in the sake of so many other people growing and reaching like further past their capacity and being able to stand in their power, which is so amazing. Once you like grasp that trickle effect of like how your actions really trickle into so many other people, it's like mind blowing. And you're like, okay, I can't stay at this current capacity. Like I have to keep progressing.
And that's one thing that when Garrett, because I remember when Garrett was like, Val, there's no accidents in life. Like everything happens for a reason. I know your response was not the kindest of words that have ever been said, because nobody wants to hear that you're like, no, you're not going to talk about my kids. My kids are not some like pawn in the game of the universe. That triggered her again to yell a little bit more. And Garrett's like, whoa.
Garrett.
I will say Garrett is a very patient man, so good for him. Because
I disagree.
Well, Garrett's is very patient with us.
I was like, that's when I just was like, I'm going silent because nothing nice is coming out of my mouth.
Like,
I'm
Val's
just going
going
off
dark.
the grid.
Val went dark.
It was funny though. We're all sitting on the plane and we all get the text like, "Hi, you guys doing?" And I'm like, "I'm doing great. This is awesome." Val, silence. And I was like, "Oh, I think she's
I'm not ready to talk yet."
But you know what? But now I do know there is a bigger sense of calm about you in regards to your kids.
There is,
and I think that's super cool. Even now, like Lennox, Lord knows he's a handful.
Man.
But it's fine.
It's so funny, like not to keep like talking about the whole kid thing, but there's some situations in my life where I'm like, oh my God, my kids lived. So I guess we're good. Like literally, there's so many stories where like, I'm going to share this one really, really quick because it's funny. So I had, when we first moved to Arizona, when my daughter was only 7 months old, I was like, Garrett, we need to take a trip. Like you and I, we need to get out. So we went to Hawaii and he's like, oh, I have a babysitter from Utah. I'll fly her in. She'll watch our kids. I'm like, cool. I thought she was like 25. I will say right now, I suck at details. Let's just put that out there. She gets there. I swear she was like 16, but she was really like 18. And I was like, oh my God, she's watching our kids. And Garrett's like, she's super cool. Don't worry about it. We get a call. Like she slipped in the bathroom, broke her ankle. Some neighbor, we had just moved to Arizona. We didn't know anybody. Luckily, like one of our neighbors came and took my kids and had them in the afternoon. And she ended up going to the emergency room and her foot was fine and all. And I'm like freaking out because I'm in Hawaii and I don't know this babysitter. I don't know my neighbors. My daughter's 7 months old.
Oh man. It
was rough. And I remember I was just like, I literally had to like hone in and I'm like, it's fine. And everything was fine. And I got home and I just learned you don't hire an 18-year-old, so that's cool. But I was just like, I had to give myself credit, or not myself credit. I had to give like my kids credit. I'm like, oh, like Bailey like helped her sister and like, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow, they figured it out without me. How dare they?
I don't know if I'm happy or a little upset.
Yeah,
and
no,
offended.
I still learned you don't hire 18-year-olds for, to watch your babies.
Yeah.
But still, I was just like, wow, kids can live through shit. That's great. You know what I mean? So.
And look, now your capacity's bigger, Val's capacity's bigger. We're all growing. So, but even with that growth and capacity, a big thing that I see is who you're around also dictates whether you grow or shrink.
Right.
So Val, I know this is something we have talked about left and right, especially between me and you and everything we've done inside of BMS. So I'll give a little background. Val is like the OG inside of BMS. She was my trainer for my BMS when I first started. And when I got brought on 6 months ago, it was her and I, like I always say we're the dream team, man. Like this is the way to go. And then Val got pulled to do something as CEO for DKW. Turns out not her favorite role. And then she came back. But even in that instance, I was partnered up with someone else. So I know for me, one of the biggest things that I saw when it comes to who you're around dictates your capacity. With Val gone, my capacity shrank. There was way more being put on my plate. And not to say anything about the girl that came and helped me. Like, she's great. She's still on our team. Like, I love her. But I realized that the teamwork was just completely different. And with that, I was different. I couldn't do as much. There was way more on my plate. My capacity, although it's still, I feel like it's very large. Like I have a very large bucket or box, whatever you want to put it as. I was struggling. And I know, Val, you were having very similar feelings, which is why we're now back on Dream Team status. So talk to me about
our Dream Team.
What is Dream Team? Oh, because you were going to do that and then come back.
Oh, yeah,
gotcha.
no. Val and I are the Dream Team. Garrett even said, he's like, I don't know what it is about you two, but
too,
something...
like you guys kind of blood and sweat together and like made it like work. And so you're kind of like, if anybody else comes in and they're not doing it like how you guys are, it throws off the balance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you'll get to the point where you have to like. I even realized inside the salon, and sorry to like cut you off, but I even realized inside the salon, I was like, we don't all have to be best friends. We have to be able to work well together. We have to be able to like vibe and have good energy. But we don't all have to like be best friends. You know what I mean? Because there's certain people in the salon that I'm like, I want to like I'd hang out with every day, and then there's some I'm like, cool. It's more of a business relationship, and that's cool too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it kind of just goes back to like eventually you guys will just get with even BMS, like you guys chum so well together, but eventually we're gonna need help. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Oh,
so
and
it'll be
we're
like,
already to that point because I'm already hiring an assistant. We have the artist assist, and now with BMS Con and where we see Mastermind going, I actually reached out to our very first artist about coming on and being an educator, like a trainer inside of the network.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's getting bigger and we're bringing people on, but I just know for like Val and I, and it's just, there's something, Garrett always says, he's like, something about you two and the teamwork you have. He's like, it can't be taught. It can't be replicated. It just is.
It's because you're like bad cop, good cop, but in like a good way.
You're obviously the bad cop, Val.
Obviously.
No, you guys are a good combo. I agree. Like it literally, like it's a good combo.
It's just so much balance. So what did you see from your side and capacity and growing and shrinking depending on like who you've been around?
Oh, I feel like when I'm with you or like when I'm with Danielle, like I want to play to the biggest version of myself because you guys are always like, your capacity is inspiring to me. So I always want to like level up and not be like left behind. And then I know sometimes when I go to people that like they're in the middle of like their growth journey or they're like hesitant to grow, that then I'll revert back because like I don't want that huge contrast or like I won't stand in like a leadership role enough, you know?
Sometimes I feel like I want to be relatable to people at a lower level.
And so you don't want to
be. Yeah.
So you like play smaller and I don't like when I do that. I get so mad and I'm like, why the fuck did I do that?
Yeah.
Damn it, Valerie, you know better. Like,
you almost have to own like I'm like the boss status here.
Yeah.
And it's cool. And like, cause I'll do that too. I'll find myself like giving like people like, I'll be playing at their level, and that's fine. But it's like at some point you have to like play at your level and be cool with you here. You
Definitely.
know? So.
And I think with what we do here, it's not. I mean, we've literally been from the very bottom, and we've risen inside of NBR, BMS. Like everything you created, Danielle, wasn't created at top level. You literally started from the bottom.
Right.
So it's not that you don't have an understanding of every single level along the way. It's just right now you already fucking fought your way all the way up to the top. Why would you go back to try and fight yourself back up again?
But even myself, like when it comes down to like coloring or anything, and I'll start to question what I'm doing, and I'm like, I fucking know what I'm doing, and I have to like go have my own little powwow in the back of our mixing room, and I'm like, I got this, you know what I mean? And I just like go inside my head and like visualize it, and I'm like, I fucking got. And it's like I'm almost giving myself like a pump up speech, and I'm like, I got this.
I would like to
I don't know if
record one
you've
of those.
seen my coloring videos with Jill, like when she does my stories. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm talking myself through this formulation right now." I'm saying, "You got this, girl." Like,
it's true though.
Like
Like you can't doubt yourself when you have to like. especially when you're catering to clients, you can't like doubt the color and be like, I hope this works. You have to just go in confident and know if it doesn't go exactly how you wanted it, you're like, it's cool, I got this. Because if you let yourself like play small and fall under that, when shit goes sideways, and for just to let everybody know who doesn't do hair, shit always goes sideways.
Yep.
If you have a really good stylist, it's because they're really fucking good at what they do, and they never let you feel like shit's going sideways.
Yeah.
And so when you can't play small and play in your head when like things don't go the way, and you have to kind of just be like, nope, I got this, we're gonna remix this and do this and this, and it doesn't become as emotional, and it just becomes more like creative logic.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, even with like capacity and like who you're around, they see the DKW team and they're like, well, I want that. How do I get that? What do I do? And I think they have to realize that inside of BMS and inside of DKW, everything we do, all of us, I mean, us three, we're like the top, we're the power players always. Like, we're the ones who are just fucking constantly building shit and doing everything. But we have such a large capacity that we're always pushing ourselves. Danielle and Garrett are pushing us. Then I'm pushing you two. You two are pushing me. Like, we're always, I feel like us four are constant, like, pushing, like, well, let's do it better. This went great last time. This part, not so great. How can we do it better? What can we do more? Let's make it better. And it's not like we're unhappy, but it's just constant growth and push. Right. And because we do that, you own the salon, you and Garrett own the companies, like, that's what everybody looks up to. They're like, well, that's what the owners are doing. I should do that too. I want to play more. With Jill, your assistant, Val, like, obviously you know who Jill is, but in case,
remind me, the name sounds vaguely familiar.
You dick. In case anyone doesn't know, Jill is Val's assistant. She was on last week's podcast. You should know her by now. But even with Jill, when she came, not that she was like a smaller version, but she would shrink down and like hide. You could even see it like in the way she stands. And now she stands taller, she stands straighter, and she plays, I mean, hard because of you.
I think that was like the sweetest thing that Kenzie ever told me is she said, because she worked with Jill in Utah when she assisted somebody else, and then she hadn't seen her for a few months, and then she came down here now, and she was like, Val, I can't thank you enough for like letting Jill be like who she is and giving her the confidence, because she is a completely different person than the last time that I saw her. And that just like,
coming
like
out
that,
of her shell.
Yes, that just made me, and I don't want to take credit for like Jill did the hard work,
You
but
held
like
space for her to do that, and you trained her though, you know, so you should take some credit.
I'm just so proud of her, and that to me, that was like, you know, when you get those emails and the positive reinforcement on stuff that you work so hard for, and I'm like, oh, that's such a cool feeling. So
I find with like assistants, it's like you want to be able to hold the frame of like you're their boss and you have more experience, but you also don't want to like look down on them. You want them to grow with you. And so that's why, like how we were talking about earlier, where it's like you don't want to shrink down to their level, but you also have to not let them shrink down and kind of like praise them and help them and teach them so that they feel like confident and they're growing with you. You're always going to be at different levels because you have more reps, you have more experience, but you have to have everybody moving in an upward motion.
Absolutely. And I love that. And that, I think, is one of the great things about our team. And we even see it inside of BMS. We are constantly pushing. And they've seen the growth that Danielle has had, that Val's had, that I've had. And they're like, okay, well, it can be done. But they always know that they have to push forward and be more. So even jumping back to like triggers and things that trigger you, because those are things that they do take away your power and they make you revert back. Talk about like, Val, talk about like being bigger than the trigger itself and getting past it.
Like for instance, like we were saying, like with the kids, that being like my trigger, that I had to like, when something was wrong with Lennox this last time, I could have easily been like, I got to get some sleep. I got to be with my sick baby. I got to this, like, I can't go to class. But it was not even like a thought in my, it was just like, it's a given. Ryan's staying home with the kid and I'm going to go ahead and go to class and do that. So is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And so how do you feel that's reflected now? Like you obviously, because I was there with you at BMS Con whenever that, or not BMS Con, I'm sorry, Feelings Con, whenever that happened, like I was literally side by side with you when Val like read the text saying, hey, FYI, there was a shooter behind your kid's school. Like I saw your face just pale drop, and I feel Val's feelings like super hard, her energy, and I was like, oh, she went to a dark place now. I'm like,
the blood just
I'm like, oh fuck, she ain't getting out of that one. Like it was bad. But now like knowing that literally the worst thing that you could have ever thought happened was a gunman at your little, like your daughter's school, your baby, which is, in case you guys don't know her kids, but her daughter is like the more emotional type as opposed to her son who's ready to like roll down the street in his little Jeep fucking shit up. Like they're very opposite children. But you know, that for you was literally the worst thing that could have ever happened. But not only did you make it through, Sawyer made it through, Ryan made it through, and everyone's better for it. So how do you feel that reflects now, like even inside of like your business and your life?
I just feel more confident. I'm super stoked this time going into convention. Last year, I was just like, my only goal was to not shit my pants. Literally, that was my only goal. And I was so nervous because that was the first time that I had left the kids 3 nights in a row because convention's 3 days and we go the day before.
Yeah. And bear in mind, guys, convention is 25 minutes from her house. She was in a hotel 25 minutes down the road. This wasn't 3 states over. Like, just so you guys understand how hard this was for Val. She's laughing because it is funny, but it was literally 25 minutes.
Yeah. But it was still the first. So I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to be on stage in front of people. I'm going to be teaching for the first time. I'm going to be away from my kids. Like, oh, I'm going to die. Like, I'm for sure dying. And then like now so many things have happened. Like I lived through convention. I went to my own feelings con. I never have shit my pants in public. Like
privately a few times, publicly never.
My capacity is just amazing, guys.
Isn't that crazy though? And I know we hear it inside the network too, where people are like, I can't. And they don't fathom it. They literally have such walls up that they can't. They say, I can't.
And you're so glad when you like push through it because now we're going into convention and I'm like I'm nothing but stoked. Like I'm just like I'm so excited every time we talk about the models and what we're doing and the pre-training, like all of it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not even stressed. So, will I miss the kids? Yes, but am I going to be so busy living my best life at convention? Yeah.
What advice would you two as trainers give women or stylists or anybody listening to this if your story is I can't because I live here or because I am married to this person or because of this, like what would your advice do when people say you can't? I know in our business, like we're kind of like, okay, you're choosing that. Like we have so many students now that we don't have time to like harp on somebody who if they're choosing to stay stuck in their stories. But if you were to like Ani, like if you were specifically to give somebody like a word of advice for their word is I can't.
I feel like I've had those words too. And that for me was moving to California. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm not that person to do that. That's for somebody else. Like, I can't. I've said, like, I've been that person. But for me, I just had to sit and think. And the biggest thing, and I know I've said this before, for me, it was a thought of, well, if I keep telling myself it's for somebody else, but I'm somebody else. To the person listening to this podcast, I'm somebody else. To the girl that just messaged me on Instagram this morning and said, I'm super excited to meet you, but you scare me. Like, I'm somebody else to her. Like, I can be an inspiration to show someone else, but I have to, this sounds terrible, get my head out of my ass and just do it.
Yeah, right.
Like, if I'm not willing to take that first step for me, nobody is ever going to take that step for me. So, and I thought, I'm like, Danielle, I know there was a time where she's like, I can't do this. I'm sure Paul Mitchell, there was a time where he said, I can't do this. The person who built the car, like a car at that time was revolutionary. He probably said, well, I can't do that. But he did. They did. Danielle did. Every single person I've met, they've always pushed forward. Why can't I be that person?
I think it's like baby steps though too. Like I remember in our last class, because there was this girl in our mastermind for years that she was like, I can't move to Florida, or I can't do this, or I can't do this. And I'm like, for me, like I get it. Like in the back of my mind, there's been so many steps in my life where I say I can't do it. And then there's just this tiny voice that says maybe. And this maybe, what I tried to teach the girls in this last class, I said, maybe doesn't have to be 100% you're moving, but what if you just entertain the idea, right? So what if you go to Florida and you just look at properties and you see what's available and you just kind of look at areas, you look at schools, and you just get that, you entertain the thought. Next thing you know, you're like, okay, well, could I do this? And then you start entertaining the thought of like, what would I have to make in order to live here? So it's like little steps like that. Like women, I can only speak for women because I am a woman, but they get like freaked out. Like they have to have the whole thing mapped out and they say, I can't, and they stay stuck in their story. So instead of like feeling like you have to commit from A to Z or have a whole plan mapped out, I think that overwhelming feeling is why people say they can't. And I think that if you actually just, all I'm asking, the only advice I would give to you, anybody who's listening who's saying I can't, just entertain the idea and from there see what happens.
Well, and that's what I did with California, because for me, coming from Missouri, the Midwest and West Coast guys, that's a black and white difference. It's not remotely the same. But I'm like, okay, well, if you were going to do it, where would you live?
Yeah.
What would that look like? Then I'm looking at houses. I'm like, cool, can't buy a house. I'm now crystal clear on that one. We're going to move on from that. But what about renting a condo or an apartment? What would that look like? And then I ended up finding a couple I liked, ended up with a realtor somehow. And I'm like, well, all right, she'll find me one. And then from there, I'm like, well, if I'm doing that, what else would I need? I'm like, I'd probably need my California cosmetology license. I bet Danielle would like me to have that. So can I even get it?
Yeah.
And then I looked, and turns out I could get reciprocity super easy. I literally took it step by step because I am that person. Yeah. I'm that person. In case you guys can't tell, I'm a planner to the max. I don't want to have A, B, and C. I want to have the whole alphabet plus 4 extra numbers at the end and then plan B on top of it. Like, it's just, it's who I am. So being like, I'm going to give up my entire clientele, all the money I'm making, the business, my house, my fiance, my family, and move across the country to, I'm not 100% sure what. I'm like, yeah, all right, we're doing this. When I land, I'll figure it out. And
well, and the other thing too, you had just bought a home, and so understanding like living in California, it's such a price adjustment. Like it's crazy. And so a lot of people were like, oh my God, well I can't. You can't have that. You can't buy a home. You're right. But then you were like, well, what if? And you started looking at like apartments and things. But then I also too, I know that you probably like aspire to be like, okay, well I'm going to start here, but I know I'm not going to be staying in this place I'm living forever. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
but you just have to start by entertaining the thought. Like, yes, you might not be able to have like if you're living somewhere and you have like a 3,000 square foot home. Yeah, you might not be able to get that in LA or wherever you want to, Florida or wherever it is. But what could you get? And what do the numbers look like? And what do the numbers have to look like if you did want to eventually get to there? Do you know what I mean? And so it's just all we have to do is entertain the thought and take baby steps. And next thing you know, you have a different life. You're a different life, and so
you're a different person.
Yes, and it's so people always get stuck thinking, getting overwhelmed, and I'm like, it's so silly that we play that small, and then once you start opening each new door, you're like, I'm still me. Like you're like, I'm still me, but I'm also like, look how much I've learned and grown. Like how cool am I?
I'm proud of this. Yeah. I feel like I'm the opposite of Ani. I get overwhelmed if I know too many steps ahead of time. Like I'm like, oh my gosh. So for me, like I've just had to take like baby steps. Like when Garrett would first put me in front of a webinar, I would literally cry when it was done. I would sit in the car because I had so much emotion. I'm like, oh my God. And I would just sit and cry. Right. Like nothing terrible happened. And I was just, there was like 7 of you guys. Like it wasn't even like a large audience, but I just had to keep like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to see where this takes me. And then the webinars went to like the mastermind live training that went to convention that went like, and so now, and I don't even have to see like where it's going down the road because that might freak me out still. So I just have to say yes, do it scared, and just keep doing little baby steps, even if I don't have everything like planned out. But if there's that little tiny whisper that you hear in your head, listen to that guy because he's going to get louder. So the sooner you listen to it, the sooner you start like making your steps and growing, the sooner like your capacity is going to grow and you're going to be that bigger, better version of yourself. But like Danielle was saying, it's still you. You're not a different person, but like you're just like proud of the person you're becoming.
I was at a Tony Robbins event a couple years back, and there was something that resonated with me. Because I always felt like I wasn't this person. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't a trainer. I was just a little shy Danielle, and I was kind of artsy, but whatever. It wasn't me, right? And he said this comment on stage, and he's like, I'm Tony Robbins, and he was just like, I created this motherfucker. And I was like, yeah, you did. And I was like, woo! And so I think everybody in the audience was like, it kind of stung everybody. We were just like, yeah, you did create him. He's still you, but you created him. And what can we create in our lives? Yeah. And so I remember having that moment. I was like, yeah, I could become the next Paul Mitchell. Cool. Let's fucking ride this out. Let's do this, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, that was like a turning point, and it's like you have to realize you can create whoever you want to become.
And one thing that I do when Val just said that she could not get too many details, Danielle, I realized that with you last BMS Con. I was helping her inside the salon, and she asked me a question about BMS Con, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be great because we have this. And she looked at me, she goes, we can't talk about it anymore. I'm not going to go. I'm like, wait, you can't. You fucking created this. You have to go. She's like, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, okay, Danielle, not a details person. Don't tell her anymore. No. Val, already know, not a details person.
Even when I'm shopping, like if I go into a store, like, and there's so many options, I'm like,
it's so stressful.
Just lay out 5 pretty things and I'll pick. I can't do it.
So, unfortunately, I'm so sad. We're coming to the end of our podcast now.
Good one.
I know. I'm like, dang, I feel like we should just keep talking for 10 more hours. So
we can, next show.
Yeah. Next episode, 3 hours, but that's fine. So, no, the biggest thing that I want you guys to take from this and what I really want you to look at inside of your life is what are you being triggered by and how are you responding to those triggers? Are you shrinking back? Are you immediately going to playing a smaller version of yourself? Or are you pushing forward to make your bucket bigger, to make your bubble bigger and grow and expand and make your capacity even more so you can continue pushing through? So thank you once again for being here with us for episode 18. Holy cow. And we'll see you guys next week.